Welcome back to episode 21 of the Invictus F1 Podcast with Sab and I. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. We're back, aren't we? League racing is back underway in Invictus this week. It was certainly some very exciting races that we'll definitely talk about later on. And obviously we've got to talk about that chaotic and frantic Brazilian Grand Prix. It all seemed a bit calm and smooth at the beginning, and then suddenly just went off the rails towards the end, didn't it? So plenty to discuss with that and our league, and it should be another good chat tonight.
Yeah, I don't know how we're going to fit this into that
No.
60, 70 minute slot because there is so much to talk about. I've ever since Sunday came and gone, I was trying to work out how are we gonna fit this in because there's so much I want to go through. There's so many talking points that have come out from the race on Saturday, and I mean, where do we start? Do we start by recapping the race and then going on, or do we start by
Yeah.
yeah?
Let's go with that.
Yeah. So Brazilian Grand Prix, of course, last weekend, absolutely fantastic end. The first half of the race, very interesting, very especially towards the front. You had Max versus Lewis, and those two trading positions using the undercut for Lewis got himself ahead after Max had a fantastic qualifying session and early start to the race as well. Lewis using that undercut, and obviously then Red Bull setting a new world record, fastest pit stop time of all time of 1.86 seconds, which is unbelievable to think that they fitted 4 new tyres in that time. But he obviously then got blocked somewhat by Kubica coming out of the Williams pit box and cost him the race lead. He then had to get past Charles Leclerc on the outlap, which he did, just actually breezed past him and then got past Lewis a few laps later. And I mean, we'll start off with that battle between those two, and that's that one that people have been looking forward to, isn't it? It's that sort of Lewis and the up and coming Max really having a go to take it to each other and be what was quite even cars, because it seems that the Honda was the probably the best engine over the weekend.
Crazy to say that, isn't it? But Max Verstappen, he was pretty unstoppable. It was kind of like he was desperate for this win this weekend, wasn't he? After he had it taken away from him last year in that unfortunate incident with Ocon at the Senna S. But I thought at first, after that world record pit stop, that we were going to get something similar when Kubica decided to be, his team released Kubica out right next to Max and pretty much shoved Max into the wall. I thought Max, he was clever in the end to see that this was coming and just about avoid that pit wall. But for me, I thought that was a little silly from Williams, because yes, they're having their own little race with their own team, but you've got the race leader in at the same time. Surely you would just hold him just to allow the race leader to go past, because that cost Max quite a few seconds. And in the end, it didn't really cost him anything. He still went on to win the race. But for me, that could have really cost him not just the race win, but even a potential podium if the race had gone against him. But moving swiftly on, the battle between him and Lewis, it's one, like you say, we've been looking forward to for a very, very long time now. I hope personally, going into next year, that we can have more of these battles at the front with Lewis, and maybe somehow, if they get their act together, some Ferraris in there as well, and we could have a really mouth-watering 2020 season if everybody gets their act together. But like you say, this track, it just absolutely evolved into a Honda track, didn't it? Everything about this track worked superbly for him, and Max took full advantage of that, didn't he?
Yeah, and do you know what? You can't fault him. He was fantastic across the weekend. It did somewhat make up for last year with that incident with Ocon, but it was just, I think until you got to obviously that first safety car period when Valtteri Bottas's engine went, that dropped him down. That brought the safety car out so that they could recover the car. And it was, like we were saying, it was a good race up until then. But after that, I mean, That is one of the most, well, especially towards for the last safety car, the most exciting I've seen in F1 in a long time. And I know we've had some really good races, especially in the mid part of this season. After France, we had like, I think, a 4 or 5 spell of really exciting races, but just that sort of all guns blazing final 4 or 5 laps, like just chaos going on. And I was talking to friends and they said they were standing up shouting at the TV. I had my partner, she cried as Pierre Gasly came across the line, as because it was so, like, everything that could have happened. And you had this just brilliant little like scenario where, well, I say brilliant little scenario, unless you're a Ferrari fan, obviously, when we'll get onto that in a second, where that second safety car happened, and then you had this restart that was quite unlike the first one. And the first one, obviously, they released quite early and gave them a little bit more of a run, but on the second one, it was such a slow release. It was meters before the line, and that meant everyone was bunched up going into turn one. And it was just fantastic. I don't know what you thought about this, but I know with the since that's happened, Ross Brawn has said he's going to look into how they can make safety car restarts sort of a little bit more exciting than they are now. And Scott Mitchell, who is a journalist for Autosport, said that the best way to do it is do it much like IndyCar do, and just do 2 by 2, and they just restart in like a side by side order. And I tend to agree with that. I think that'd be brilliant. And equally, if they bring that safety car line way closer to the start finish line, so the cars are sort of accelerating all together in one go, and it's almost like a second start. So I don't know, what do you think when it comes to safety cars? Because I don't know about you, but yeah, those 2 safety car restarts were brilliant.
Yeah, the second one especially, because you just thought they were all going to trip up over each other, didn't you? They were so, like you say, so bunched up. It was absolutely fascinating to see. Sometimes in, like, safety cars in the past, you'll see them, like I say, set off early, and by the time they've got across the safety car line, they're already quite spread out, and nothing really happens, and the race carries on its merry way. But yeah, especially that second one, it was just insane. And I just want to talk as well. I've missed 2 races this year. The first race was Germany. I was at Silverstone, and look what happened there. I missed this race. I went to see Le Mans 66, which, by the way, is a superb film if you get the opportunity to see that. I went to see that film and thought, I doubt I've missed much. How wrong was I? I got my phone out and I thought instantly it must have rained, because I looked and it said Pierre Gasly second, Carlos Sainz fourth, and I was like, what the hell is going off? And I was frantically texting my friends going, what's going on, what's happened, trying to find out what's going off. And luckily Sky had the full rerun on TV later on that night. So basically, if you want a really good, fascinating race, just get me not to watch it and you will get a superb race. Well, it's just weird, isn't it? The German Grand Prix was chaotic in completely different scenario to Brazil, because of the rain and the unpredictable conditions, and this Brazil one was just chaotic in its own little way, and I just found it absolutely fascinating to watch back, even though I knew the result. Absolutely fascinating to watch back, and yeah, it'll definitely go down as one of the very best races this season.
Yeah, and well, unfortunately, I think even if we buried you in a box about 4 miles under the Earth's surface, nothing can make Abu Dhabi an exciting race. So
please don't do that.
But yeah, I mean, it was brilliant, and you did miss it, and I did say straight away after the race, you need to watch this. But yeah, I mean, if we go back to that first safety car restart after Valtteri's engine blow up, and obviously you had Lewis leading the way. With Max behind. Max goes to the outside, down into T1. Lewis, I think, runs him out and is hard racing between the two, but gives him enough space. Max goes around the outside. And at the time, the 2 commentators were focusing on the fact that there was a change for lead, obviously, and so they should. But behind, Alex Albon made an absolutely brilliant move around the outside of Sebastian Vettel, sorry,
Yeah.
and it was just about picked up as they got towards the exit of turn 3, and I think, and obviously we know what happened to Alex, and we'll go on to it after we've talked about the Ferraris. But that was brilliant from him, and once again, it's that Honda power. We know how well it was working, and but he's sort of really, especially after this race, I think he's starting to just get back into that, because he had an off in practice session, and qualifying maybe didn't get him where he wanted. He was only fifth on the grid, I believe. But yeah, to make a move on a multi-time world champion like that, that's got to give you a huge boost of confidence to know that he can race these guys when he gets the chance to go wheel to wheel with them.
Oh yeah, definitely. I definitely think this was a standout weekend for Alex. Yeah, maybe not in the qualifying and what have you, but race trim, he looked absolutely superb. And like you say, we'll get on to what happened to him later on. But Alex is really started to prove why he deserves that seat in 2020, and if he can keep doing what he is doing now and take on the likes of Sebastian Vettel and the other Ferraris and any of I said Williams for some reason, and the Mercedes, sorry, then Red Bull have made the right choice, the smart choice. They just need to, like I said in the previous podcast, they need to just back him now and support him, that when it does go wrong, that they just put an arm around and say, come on, look, we're all right, we're still going, it's fine. And if Alex keeps going the trend he is, then him and Max next season, for me, look a very, very strong lineup going into 2020.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's going to be a really nice pairing, which actually brings us on to the obviously the next point, and obviously we've gone for a very nice pairing to what is turning into a being not so nice pairing, and we've got the two Ferraris who, where do you stand on this? Because I've seen people, obviously you go on Twitter, you've got the super fans of each side, so you don't really tend to see a particularly unbiased opinion when you go on social media. But if you look at it in a vacuum, and you look at what both drivers did, what happened with, obviously, it was Charles sent it down the inside going into turn 1, got the move done. I thought it was a pretty brave but very decent overtake on his teammate. Seb then tries to overtake him around the outside using DRS. They touch by just a I mean, it is just a fraction of a second. And it gives both drivers a puncture, enough to break the front suspension of Charles Leclerc and give Seb a rear puncture and put them both out of the race, which of course gave us that brilliant second safety car. But where do you come down on this? Is it both of them should be at fault? Is it Seb, or is it Charles for not giving the space?
It's tough, isn't it? For me, talking about the incident, we've seen cars in this race and previous races really bang wheels and trip over each other a lot harder than that, and not really come away with much damage. And it was literally like a hot knife through butter, wasn't it? And just unravelled both cars so easily. It was a bizarre incident in anything, because in other times when teams have raced that closely and nearly touched wheels, you don't normally see anything happen. So that was a really bizarre incident. When I'd heard that these Ferraris had took each other out at the time, I thought, oh, it's going to be a big accident or something. And to see that, it was really bizarre. But it's hard to say. Someone on Reddit has put a frame by frame of the incident, and it looks like from the frame by frame that Seb slightly comes over from the white line on as you look at it head on. So do you blame Seb? The FIA ended up giving it as a racing incident, I seem to recall. So maybe that's probably the best way to go about it, because it just... Yeah, I could understand if he'd full on come across the track and gone into him, then yeah, give it Seb. But because he did try to squeeze Charles and try to make his presence known, but the way the accident was just seemed very bizarre. I'd probably slightly blame Seb, just because the frame by frame I've seen, you see him from one side to the other, but it's tough to say really. It's just... just a bizarre incident overall. I think if that was to happen again, you probably wouldn't have seen such a dramatic DNF for both of them. So I think it's one of those what's obviously going to end up causing more trouble within the camp at Ferrari, and it's not going to do the team any good going into this next weekend. They'll all say that it's done and dusted and forgotten about, but deep within that team there's definitely going to be even more frowns and frustration glared at each other going into Abu Dhabi, looking alongside each other in the garages. So yeah, I just think Ferrari now, they had the opportunity to win many races the second half of the season. They've won some, and they've still been quite poor in my opinion. So they just need to write this season off now and go into next year clean slate if they can possibly do that.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think Seb probably has to shoulder the majority of the blame here. He did go for the outside line and then did his usual. We've seen he's done it before. He does it quite often. He likes to come across and just give himself a little bit extra track, extra space. And I mean, two very high profile times he's done it, and he's done it incorrectly. Were obviously against Mark Webber a few years ago when they were teammates at Red Bull, and at the start in Singapore where he came across to try and cover off Lewis Hamilton and ended up crashing into Max Verstappen and his teammate Kimi Raikkonen. So he does like to kind of squeeze someone to give himself a little bit more room. But then I do think, and I was watching Jolyon Palmer's analysis on YouTube, and he's pretty good with how he looks at it, because he does say that Charles Leclerc isn't completely faultless in this, because Charles hadn't had the best of races, and then equally if you look at what he did at the start of the race when it comes to jinking maneuvers, and obviously there was right at the start when he was making that move on the Renault and of Lando Norris, and he was coming into Yuncao at the end of the lap, and he just tries to spook Lando and just flicks the car to the left hand side. And luckily for Lando, I think he's a little bit was probably got nerves of steel, wasn't really phased by it, and actually sent it back up the inside going into the corner. So yeah, it's I think Charles is definitely probably trying to flex his muscles as being the next the king of the castle in Ferrari, and with Seb kind of trying to hold on to it. It's this the scenario that Ferrari have got, especially going into next season. It's got a slight aftertaste of 2016 2017 Mercedes, hasn't it? Because you've got two admittedly very quick drivers, one a multi-time champion, one that hasn't won a championship, and I mean, two doesn't really go into one when it comes to winning a race. And if Ferrari have a winning package next season, I think we can probably expect the same thing maybe to happen on a more regular occurrence. This was the first time they were really allowed to race each other. We haven't really seen them go wheel to wheel too often, where both cars are on a sort of equal playing field when it comes to strategy. Of course, they had at the end of the Hungarian Grand Prix, I think it was Charles had much worse tyre wear, so Seb made an easy pass on him. And equally in Bahrain, Charles was way quicker than Seb. But this was the first time they've really kind of had that equal place to kind of fight, and they crashed each other on a straight, which is almost unforgivable if you're Mattia Binotto.
Yeah, definitely, and it wouldn't surprise me if at the final race in Abu Dhabi they get put on different strategies so this doesn't happen again, because if this was to happen again, then there's going to have to be some serious words sitting the pair of them down and saying, look, this can't go on. And yeah, they've been butting heads for a long while now, haven't they? It might seem okay on the outside, and they're saying there's not much to talk about. But like I say, they clearly are butting heads. Charles, like you say, it's very similar to Nico and Lewis. Charles, the non-champion, trying to make his mark on the four-time champion. So yeah, I would not be surprised at all if Ferrari decide to split the strategies up in qualifying and maybe put one on the soft tyre, one on the medium tyre, and go completely different, something like that. Just so if they do come across each other on track, there's a genuine reason to say, right, Seb or Charles, you can overtake because you're on a separate strategy. And I think that'd probably be best if they were wanting to try it and take the final win of the season. But we shall see. You never know with Ferrari and their strategies. You just never know what they're going to come up with. We heard once again on the radio this weekend, Plan C, Charles, Plan C. The amount of times Ferrari have gone through the alphabet with their plans this season is quite ridiculous. So who knows what they're going to be bringing into Abu Dhabi in a few weeks' time.
No, but I mean, whatever it is, and I can't state this enough. Whatever it is, it will not make the race interesting in the slightest. So
you really don't like it, do you?
I will state this for the record, and I will say this, and if I have to say it on every podcast for the rest of the time, I will. Abu Dhabi is one of the worst tracks that has ever been designed. The fact that it is the last Grand Prix of the season is an absolute tragedy, and I mean, the title of this is "Why Can't This Be the End?" And it is. Why can't the season have ended on this race? Because it would have been an absolute cracking way to go out. You would have had the two Ferraris crashing into each other, which sets up next season absolutely brilliantly with two drivers that ended on bad blood that are going to have to go up against each other. You've got Max and Lewis going at each other. You had Alex having a good race, which would have given him confidence for next season. And you had a really good sort of feel-good story with Pierre Gasly and Carlos Sainz ending up on the podium. That's how you want to end the season, not by a couple of fireworks and driving underneath a hotel. But not to say
I'm loving this. Keep going. I'm loving
Don't
this.
worry, I could go on forever about how Abu Dhabi is the worst place to have the final Grand Prix, but I will digress. But we'll go back and so that crash between the Ferraris caused second safety car. Max really slowed the pace down, and Lewis came in. They boxed him with whatever it was, three laps left to go. I think it was, which was a very strange decision, very brave decision from Mercedes. And even afterwards, they said that was the wrong decision to make. They should have kept him out on track. Sorry, he dispatched Pierre Gasly pretty quickly, which was lucky for him. He then chased down Alex Albon, and Alex had done remarkably well, running up as it was a Red Bull 1-2 at the time. And I think it was Alex took the racing line into turn 10, I think it is. And he left the door open somewhat, and Lewis tried to go down the inside, closed very quickly, turned Alex around, put him to the back of the grid, off the podium. I'm gutted because last week I said that Alex was going to get a podium, and that was my shock prediction. And there was me sitting on Sunday rubbing my hands together, ready to come on the podcast today and tell you how just wonderfully brilliant I am with my predictions. And it was all taken away from me in a flash of a second with a front wing and a front tyre of a Mercedes. But turned Alex around, unfortunately dropped in the rear end. You could hear on the radio afterwards he was absolutely gutted with it, and said that Lewis probably would have got him on the main straight, but Lewis, of course, being the pure winner that he is, knew that he was on fresh tyres and he could potentially have maybe have caught Max. It would have been, I mean, it wouldn't have happened if we look at it realistically, but he would have been pretty close on those new tyres. But it promoted Pierre up into second place, and then we had this brilliant moment coming out the final corner on the last lap with a Mercedes versus a Honda dragging side by side, and you'd think with the inside line that Lewis had the slight advantage, but that Honda power. It's not even just in the Red Bull, but coming out that Toro Rosso, coming across the line fractionally ahead. Massive result for Honda, massive result for Pierre Gasly.
Wasn't it just? And that drag, like you say, that was the most surprising thing at the end for me, was that Honda power out dragging a Mercedes to the line and beating the Mercedes. That shocked me, I'm not going to lie, because you'd have thought most of the time when you see a Mercedes go side by side with any car, not a Honda particular, in any car in previous seasons, they've always got the move done, haven't they? So that that to happen was a real surprise. But I just want to touch on one thing. That's one thing I think's really good about Lewis is it's very rare you see him have these sort of mistakes, these little accents, isn't it? I can't remember the last time he did a move like that, what ended up costing a driver many positions. So it just shows you how consistent he has been in recent years, because it's not very often he will fall and foul for these things. It's like you say, the door slightly open, but it was always going to be shut on him, unfortunately. You don't tend to see moves going into there, but I think that was just a sign of Lewis knowing he's not got many laps left and he's got to get the move done now in order to be able to try and catch Max up. But I was personally gutted for Alex Albon, because he's such a lovely bloke to talk to in person, and he always seems to come across in interviews and stuff as a really nice guy, and he deserved to get on the podium. And unfortunately, there's 4 Red Bull drivers now on the grid, and he is the only one who's not had a podium, which is crazy to think about, really. But Pierre Gasly, absolutely huge congratulations to him. You heard his team radio at the end when he was literally screaming down his mic for a good 2 minutes, and could you blame him? I couldn't blame him at all. I'd probably doing the same if I'd just picked up a P2 when it seemed very unlikely we were ever going to get a P2. So yeah, huge congratulations to Pierre Gasly. He thoroughly deserved it, and that incident eventually then, when the stewards sorted it all out, cost Lewis 3rd place and promoted Carlos Sainz, because Lewis got the 5-second penalty. But Carlos Sainz didn't get it so easily 3rd place, did he, because of that impending investigation what was hanging over him.
No, and I think it was funny watching the paddock at the end of the race, because it felt like everyone was sitting there on tenterhooks waiting for this steward's decision to come out regarding Lewis's penalty, and then equally there was no celebration straight away, because obviously there was that everyone being investigated for using DRS, I believe it was, too early, and
yeah.
So we sat there for ages, and I mean, obviously you had the two drivers that had that finished the race in 1st and 2nd. You had Max and Pierre that were still managing to go off and celebrate, and below that, really, it was anyone's guess, because you look down and Carlos was one of the guys being investigated, and if not, it would have been Kimi in 3rd position if Carlos had been given a penalty, which is crazy to think, because if you look through the field, you have Carlos and Kimi split by 0.6 of a second. Antonio Giovinazzi and Daniel Ricciardo 5th and 6th, split by 0.3 of a second. Lewis just held on to 7th ahead of Lando by, I think it was 0.06 of a second. And then, but even the Williams was only, I think it was 1.3 seconds off of the points with George Russell. But I mean, I would like to say, also going back to with Lewis with Albon, is that you have to give him massive props. The first thing he did was hold his hands up and say that it was his fault. And the first thing he did when he got out of the car was go up to Alex before he even had an interview and apologise, because I'm sure as a 6-time world champion, he knows what it feels like to be on the podium in his rookie season, as he did when he was back at McLaren. So it was really nice for him to kind of hold his hands up to that one. But I'm going to kind of let you loose here, because the news came through, and there was roars on live TV if you watch back the F1 broadcast with Will Buxton, and coming out of the McLaren garage. And as obviously, as everyone knows, as a huge McLaren fan, how does it feel? What's it like for the team? And obviously, it's been many years of really poor car, poor engine, poor luck, and this season, yes, it is slightly fortuitous, but, and this is what gets us on to our main point this evening, Carlos had to get into that position, and there's a reason why he got up into 4th, and I don't think it was particularly too lucky. I think as a McLaren fan, what does it mean for the team first?
I think, for me personally, it shows all the hard work that they've put into not just this season but last season as well, after recovering from the dire days of the Honda era. Last season didn't go so well, but it was always a rebuilding process from there, and it's still a rebuilding process now. The team don't want to be getting thirds and seconds, even though they are fantastic. They want to be back at the top step. They want to be winning again, and they want to fight for championships. And yes, that's still a way off. So to claim a third place, an unlikely third place this season, after everything they've gone through, the rebuilding process with the management structure and the car itself and everything like that, I think every single person at Woking thoroughly deserved that third place, because they've got to have had really thick skin the past few years with all the hate and grief and everything else that's been on social media and everywhere else. You've got to really ignore that and just focus on what you're doing and keep this project going of where they want to go. And this season as a whole has proven that McLaren are starting now to come to the end of that tunnel. They are starting their way back up, and one thing that frustrated me on social media, and this is one thing that always frustrates me on social media, people were still finding ways to have a dig and have a moan at McLaren because they're celebrating third. Now, I'm sorry, but after the tough years they've had, a third place would feel like a win. And the way that race went, Carlos Sainz starting at the back of the grid, you don't expect him to get third. No disrespect to Carlos Sainz. I don't even think the team expect him to get third. Maybe get into ninth or 10th at a push. But you'd only normally expect like a Lewis Hamilton, if he was starting at the back, to get up onto the podium. So to get a third eventually when it was all cleared, it did feel like a win. And not only did it feel like a win for that race, it felt like a win because of all their hard work they've put into this season and just the determination of the team. They've knuckled down. They've worked on loads of different things. Yeah, there's still work to be done. They're not up there yet with the likes of Red Bull and what have you to fight regular in these points. And like you say, it was fortuitous. But in order to get into these positions, you've just got to finish. And if other people are crashing out or breaking down or what have you, then that's for you to take advantage of, isn't it? So thoroughly deserved. I was going absolutely wild, as you could probably imagine, because last podium was 2014 Australia, and Kevin Magnussen ended up second that day because Daniel Ricciardo had been disqualified and eventually promoted against the third. So some fortuitousness there as well at that time, but Kevin had a great race himself. But McLaren, I think they deserve that, and they put up a load of things about this is for the fans and stuff, and yeah, it's well deserved, and it should be celebrated as a big achievement, because like I say, the way this last few years have gone, the way this seasons have gone, it's a good reward for how the season's gone for the team.
Yeah, I totally agree, and it was so nice to see the team back on the podium, even though obviously they weren't able to go up there due to the penalty not being given for about half an hour after the race. But yeah, to see McLaren back up at the top end of the field, and it's definitely we've had this weird scenario with two Toro Rossos being on the podium when they aren't really the sort of the fourth most competitive car. But yeah, you'd like to think that McLaren probably deserved this one over the season because of just where they've come from and how hard they've worked. And equally, I brought that up a couple of weeks ago and I've talked about it. Just the fact that I think this team as a whole have almost re-energized Formula One. I think we're going through a sort of a nice period in Formula One now, where the social media departments of each team are on fire. The social media managers of these Formula One teams are brilliant, and they interact with each other and interact with the fans really well. But then the team ethic and the team attitude that McLaren have shown throughout the season, with just the way that they've been as between themselves and the fans, and then equally the driver pairing. And it's been so refreshing to see two drivers that have just really, really enjoyed each other's company. You can see that although it's not been the best of seasons, and Lando was particularly upset after Brazil,
Yeah.
knowing that he said he was feeling particularly I won't use the same word, but was feeling particularly slow, and was disappointed with himself. But if he's got that sort of, we know that he's got the talent, and clearly the car is able to push up towards the front. So if he gets that luck, and equally he's got a great almost mentor now, because Carlos has got 100 races under his belt. So that's a great mentor for Lando, because it's not too, because it almost felt like when you had Stoffel and Fernando, that Stoffel was almost frozen with fear with just how good Fernando was. And I don't think Lando's got that with Carlos. Obviously, this is Carlos's first podium, and but he can impart good wisdom, and equally he knows Formula One a little bit better than Lando. So I think, yeah, it's really good for the team, and I think it's good for Formula One to see a team like McLaren, like Toro Rosso back on the podium.
I 100% agree. Lando, the thing, what frustrates me a little bit with Lando is he was incredibly harsh on himself in that radio, as you brought up at the end. But for me, he's got to remember that the second half of this season, most of the tracks he's been to, he's never raced on before. So, yeah, he'll have done sim work, but that's not ever going to be the same to the real thing. So, all I can say for Lando is to put it down to experience. He gets on like a house on fire with his teammate Carlos. They're always laughing and joking together. They spend together the time off track together as well. So there's clearly a good relationship there. So there is a huge good romance and stuff. Not romance, but you know what I mean, like a budding romance sort of thing, right? They can get along really well. So for me, Lando just needs to carry on doing what he's doing. Try not to be so harsh on himself, and use this season as a learning experience. He was, no disrespect to Lando, but he was always going to end up probably behind Carlos in the championship order, and yeah, Lando probably would have been closer if he had had better luck, but that will come, I think. And next season, when he's got this season under his belt, and he can start the next season knowing that he's ready for some of these races he's not probably been ready for this year, I'm sure he'll be even better next year, as long as the car comes good. But the only other frustration I would have to say is F1 once again didn't show much of Carlos Sainz due to things going off elsewhere in the race. So I don't know if you've seen it as well, but they had to put a YouTube video up of his exploits from 20th all the way up to 3rd with some radio commentary as well. And there were some really good moves in there. The move on Sergio Perez was particularly good into turn 1 into the Senna S. He left it late and got the move down on the inside and forced Perez just to stay a little wide and allowed him through. So yeah, Carlos Sainz, he's showing that even when he's at the back, he's still got moves to gain positions quite quickly, and he's definitely one for overtakes this season.
Yeah, and it's been brilliant. I think he's been brilliant. Lando like you say, he has only just left his teens, so he's got much to learn. He's got much to improve, and he's already been turning heads. We know this season that there was talk earlier this season that Mercedes were having a look at him, and there's no smoke without fire when it comes to rumours in Formula One. So I think McLaren have got two very, very talented drivers, but it kind of brings us on nicely to our sort of main point of the evening that we were going to get onto, and it is really how good is Carlos Sainz. And you've met him. You've watched the guys here, and equally it's the team ethos more than I do. How good is he? From a driver that came in that looked sort of, when he left Renault, that he was sort of, this was probably his last chance saloon in being able to make it as a Formula One driver. Didn't really get on with Max Verstappen when they came into Formula One at Toro Rosso. Ended up leaving the Red Bull program. But yeah, 101 Grand Prix, his first podium. But yeah, where is he in that sort of that level of driver on the grid?
I honestly think he can progress quite far now. For me, I think what's helped him the most is all the other teams he's been at. He's never had chance to unpack his bag, so to speak. He's always been ready to move somewhere else. Whereas when the situation with Daniel Ricciardo going to Renault came about, and Carlos knew he didn't have a seat, and McLaren came in for him. McLaren just came in for him and said, "Look, we want you to lead our team." Brand new lineup, lead our team. We're going to make you our number one driver. We want you to take us forward. We're going to give you a multi-year contract, and we're going to say, right, you chase those points for us. You try and chase a podium, etc. And I think that arm round him and saying, look, you are our man, has just filled him with confidence. He's finally been allowed to show that he can compete at the very front of the grid and battle well, because like I say, he's never really had the opportunity to lead a team wherever he's been. He wasn't really the team leader at Toro Rosso when he was with Max Verstappen. He wasn't really the team leader with Nico Hulkenberg. He was always on an equal keel. But now, because he's got a younger teammate, he's required to lead the team, bring his own experience in from different teams. So that, I think, has just helped him massively. And going forward, I think McLaren have got themselves now, not just with Carlos, but with Lando as well, they've got themselves a really strong partnership going forward, because if they can carry on this upwards trend, building a good car and then working towards the Mercedes deal in 2021, who knows what Carlos could bring as long as the team bring the car for him, because it's proven this year that even though McLaren now confirmed fourth best in constructors, that they have at times been able to fight with Red Bulls and what have you. So it is there. I think Carlos, for me, this might sound biased, but Lewis Hamilton's going to get the driver of the season because he's a six-time world champion. I'd probably say Max Verstappen will be right up there. But if you didn't include those two, you would have to say Carlos Sainz is driver of the season, just because, for me, Lewis is expected to win world championships in a Mercedes. Max Verstappen, we all know how talented he is, so he's expected to win races, he's expected to get pole positions. Nobody this season expected McLaren to be as strong as they are, and nobody expected Carlos Sainz to be as strong as he was, and to be seventh, I think he's in the Drivers' Championship now with 95 points. No one expected that. So for me, Carlos has maximised everything possible out of that car and really took advantage. And it's funny because if you remember the start of the season, I'm sure he didn't finish the first three races. So do you imagine where he would be if he'd have finished those races as well? So for me, it might sound biased, but he has to be driver of the season just because of what he's achieved in the car he's in. And that's why I think going forward, he could potentially fight for podiums and race wins as long as the car's underneath him.
Yeah, and I think if the car is there, he's got the talent. I mean, I think both have got the talent to be well up the grid. But he's just been so consistent this season as well, which is something that McLaren haven't really had a driver pairing for a long time, where both drivers have been able to contribute decent points. And although Lando's had his issues with reliability and random, like obviously we saw the weird suspension failure in Canada and the likes of that, and so he's dropped points, but they've got a team now that can really push for some decent points. And like you say, he is level seventh in the standings alongside Gasly. Gasly with that huge 18-point boost from the second place last week. But it means that he has the potential. If he finishes sixth next week or even seventh, he goes up above 100 points, which has only been done a few times over the last few years. It's only Sergio Perez that's done it in the hybrid era. Since Williams, when Williams was the third fastest car in that first year of 2014, and it was Valtteri Bottas, I think, got 186, I believe it was. But yeah, it's only Sergio Perez has got 100 points in 2017 and 101 in 2016. He can go up above that 100 mark if he gets a decent result again in Abu Dhabi in a couple of weeks' time. So that shows just how consistent he's been, because it's not done often. You don't often see these sort of Formula 1.5 teams getting drivers towards. I think last season the highest point scorer in seventh, I think it was 69. I think it was Nico Hulkenberg. So it shows just how much he's sort of picking up points, and it might be that he picks up extra points here and there when you have some of the the top 6 dropping points, but he's good. Like you've got to be there to pick up those points, and that's what he's doing. He's managing to pick up these 5th places. He had that streak. I think was it 3 races in a row? He was 5th or something like that early in the mid-season. So
Yeah.
it's yeah, I think he's a great talent, which is strange because I don't know. It's funny because if you look at him in a vacuum coming in, would you say that he earned his way into Formula One? Because if you look through the junior formula, he definitely didn't really kind of set the world alight. He was a Formula 3.5 winner in 2014. That was the season before he joined Toro Rosso. Before that, didn't really do anything when he was part of Carlin in the junior formula. He was kind of 11th, 12th in a couple of seasons, and yeah, it's obviously he's got a very famous rally car driving dad, and Carlos Sainz Senior. But is it luck? Is it talent? Is it family name? What got him to Formula One, and what's maintained him in this seat? And then and equally, what is it that has changed him since he came into Formula One to where he is now?
That's a good question, isn't it? Maybe it is a case of family orientated that got him into Formula One and a bit of luck. But when he did get in, he's at Toro Rosso. I think people tend to forget he gave as good as he got with Max Verstappen in Toro Rosso at the time, and they obviously favoured Max, and Carlos kind of was sat waiting for his opportunity. I think, like I say, because he's now been given the confidence to show what he can do in a team that's willing to back him more than one season. He's starting to really blossom now, and yes, sometimes you do need a bit of luck to get into Formula One, or you might need a little bit of a nudge from your dad or something like that. But it sometimes works out nicely, and sometimes doesn't work out at all. You've only got, for example, to look at Lance Stroll at the moment. He's got a nice cushion in Formula One because of his dad. I'm not comparing the two, but sometimes it just works out like that for you, doesn't it? And because of Carlos Sainz got given that opportunity at Toro Rosso, he clearly must have done enough to stay within Formula One. Renault then giving him the opportunity. And I think it's funny, isn't it, how Formula One works? If Renault didn't make that move for Daniel Ricciardo when they did, would Carlos Sainz still be at Renault now? It'd be very interesting to work out what would be happening in Formula One now. What would the driver lineup be at McLaren? So it's weird how all these things work out, and for Carlos, it again might have been luck that the fact that Renault did decide to go for Daniel Ricciardo and not keep him, because it then dropped him into the opportunity to go to McLaren, and we've seen this season how much that's benefited him. So yeah, luck can play a part in it, and sometimes you do need that luck, and it just proves that where he's right now and what got him there has proved all the luck in the world. So yeah, I'm delighted for him. He thoroughly deserves to be where he is now, and he's now proving why he thoroughly deserves to be there. So, my only thing is, I bet Daniel Ricciardo's regretting that deal from McLaren now when they offered it him.
Yeah, it's been brilliant to watch McLaren's return to somewhat form and see them fight back, and equally moving past that 100 point mark. They've now smashed that 140 points they're on now. They've basically nailed on fourth place in the championship. I think Renault would have to have a 1-2 finish if they were to get anywhere close to that. So unless we're expecting something explosive, which we're not because it's Abu Dhabi,
can I just say, if that does somehow happen, we've got to have you say that Abu Dhabi is the best race in the world. If that somehow happens, that's how confident I am.
I tell you what, if anything like that happens, if we get a Renault 1-2, I will get the track tattooed on me.
Oh God, I hope that
happens. Heart.
Amazing.
So, but yeah, that's. I mean, yeah, Carlos, he's been brilliant all season. There's not enough superlatives that we've given him so far, and like we said, he can break the 100-point mark, which has only been done a couple of times this since we've had this hybrid era. And yeah, that wraps us up for Formula One. Of course, I don't even want to say the name, but I'm going to have to. Yas Marina, Abu Dhabi for the final Grand Prix of the season in a
Yay.
couple of weeks' time. Cannot wait to see the wonder of the tunnel that goes underneath the track. Isn't that exciting? Um, so yeah, that will be the final one. We'll see who can go out on top. Whether Lewis can add to those wins. I'm sure he'll want to go out with a win, and equally he'll probably want to get himself on pole position, knowing that he's had this spell of non-pole positions after his good start this season as well. So yeah, it's something to look forward to. But it's what was to look forward to this week was the return of the regular season for Invictus Racing League. And of course, if you are new to us and you're listening to the podcast, we talk about F1 every Thursday, but we are, of course, a esports league on PS4 for F1 2019, the Invictus Racing League. And yeah, it was our first round of the regular season. Round 1 of 12. It was held at the Hungaroring, just outside Budapest in Hungary, and 4 races over Monday through Wednesday. One on Monday, one on Tuesday, 2 on a Wednesday. And it was Monday night that kicked us off, and it was our IRL F1 League. This is our fastest league here in Invictus Racing League, and it's Sab and I that actually provide the commentary for that one. And the race was well, it was Jumpalainen had an absolutely magnificent battle, really, with the Warislander. The Warislander putting it on pole, a very young Dutch driver, new to no assists and new to the league, and he really kind of stood out in qualifying with that pole position and taking it to Jumpalainen, who we're expecting to be a championship challenger later down the line in this season. And unfortunately for Warris, he stayed with him and just started to fall off in the last third of the race, and unfortunately with on the penultimate lap actually lost control and put it into the wall, lost that front wing, which dropped him all the way down to 6th place, I believe it was. And that promoted Foxy Red 2000, who is another driver that's done very nicely for himself in pre-season, up into 2nd position. And Boy Ben SB, a former champion at Invictus, finished on the podium, but a post-race steward's inquiries demoted him down to 4th, promoted Harry up into 3rd position, Harry BR25. And Harry I've got down as my star performer for F1 after starting 16th and finishing 3rd. But for a race as a whole, how did you find the opener in F1?
It was decent. The qualifying definitely not surprised me, but amazed me. To get into the 116s, the top 3 was very impressive on those medium tyres. John Palainen definitely looks like the real deal, doesn't he? It was a good battle with him and the Warris. I was absolutely gutted for Warrislander, I'm not going to lie. He looked absolutely superb throughout the whole race, and unfortunately that little incident has cost him a deserved podium in the end. I think he thoroughly deserved to be at least 2nd. He pushed John Palainen all the way. Foxy Red, he's carrying that form on, isn't he? In Invictus, in the IRL F1, he got on the podium twice in pre-season and is on the podium yet again. And that level of consistency will win you championships. So who knows for Foxy Red? But I think for me, John Palainen is definitely one to watch because he looked absolutely mighty again on Monday night.
Yeah, he was mega. But it's going to be a fascinating season if that's the case with the likes of the Warris and if he is to push forward. And of course, IRL F1 Monday nights 8 p.m. here on the YouTube channel. So of course you can go to Invictus Racing League on YouTube and subscribe to make sure you catch all of that action. IRL F1 of course is an amalgamation of last season's no assist championship and the equal performance F1. So these guys are using no assists, so they're the fastest guys we've got here in Invictus, and equally are driving the cars as they should be driven with no assists. And yeah, it's a fantastic season started off, and looks like the viewers loved that, and yeah, so we'll be bringing you round 2 next week, so make sure you join us for that one. Tuesday night is the Realistic Performance League. So Realistic Performance is based off of your performance in a previous race. So if you did well in one race, the next race you might get a slightly slower car, vice versa. If you came lower down, you might get a better car. Tends to balance out the field, puts the faster drivers in slower cars, so it makes it a lot easier for these guys to race and make it pretty interesting, as you found out yourself.
Yeah, pretty interesting. I was fortunate enough to be given the Ferrari for this race, and ended up in a super battle with Jos. He was in the Alfa Romeo and just couldn't quite shake him in the end. He proved just to be that much quicker than me. We had a super battle throughout the whole race. I stuck with him like glue. I was always pretty much within his DRS for every lap, and unfortunately just couldn't quite get first place taken. But I'm very happy with second place. Ton Albanak, he also in the Alfa Romeo, came in third. I think he started about 9th or 10th. He started, so that was a very good race for him. He'll be delighted to be on the podium, especially as I heard him speaking in the lobby. He didn't really expect to be up that high, so super for him. And it's a good start to the Performance League. We had a very strong lineup going into it. There's a pretty full grid, so really good to see that and see how interested people are in the Performance League. And yeah, unfortunately for myself, not quite first, but I'll be delighted with second. It was a very good race to watch back. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, and that is Tim and Malc in the commentary. Your Jew Atlantic commentators there. Tim, of course, the American. Malc, the Brummie, and you can hear those guys Tuesday evenings, 8 p.m. here on YouTube, and that takes us on to Wednesday, and it's IRL F2 and F3, formerly known as the Equal Performance Leagues. And F2 was won by Lozak 97, the Belgian driver. He finished ahead of the driver pairing of Aaron and Colin, and those two in the Alfa Romeo made a fantastic had a fantastic qualifying session, but it was Lozak really that blew the competition away, just drove away from the rest of the field. It was a dry race all the way through to about 4 or 5 laps to go, and he had a slight sprinkling of rain that caught out a few drivers, couldn't quite work out if it was intermediates, couldn't quite work out if it was a dry end, and there was an absolute mega battle over the final points paying positions. In fact, that Sab and I were a part of 4 cars battling it out, swapping positions every corner for about 2.5 laps. So yeah, it was a great race on Wednesday night, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was. Lozak definitely looks like the man to watch this season. I'm pretty sure, like we were discussing before this went live, he was pretty close to catching us. Like we were squabbling that much towards the end. It was a super race throughout. Again, another really full lineup. It's really good to see the interest and the growth of these leagues this year. And F2 is proving to be a very, very good league to watch. That was my debut in F2 last night. I'm thoroughly happy with how that went. So yeah, Hungary not one of my strongest tracks, so looking forward to getting on next week. But yeah, F2 very, very interesting. It's certainly an eye-opener for me as well, because stepping up from F3 into F2 just shows you the difference in levels, because some of the guys out there are pretty quick for me anyway, and just shows you what you've got to do in order to score good points in this league.
Yeah, and that is of course commentated on by Energy Dan and the Warislander, who jumps from the track into the commentary box. And so Wout and Dan commentate Wednesday nights 8 p.m, which goes live at the same time as IRL F3. And IRL F3 this week was won by a Formula F3 champion, in fact, and it was Spud, who's recently dropped back down into F3, and he took the win on Wednesday night ahead of Mr. P, who's equally dropped down from F2 recently. and Craig, our site director, rounding out the podium, making it a great result for Spud and Craig, teammates in F3 as they go 1-3. And but yes, it was great to see Spud back winning races.
Yeah, it is. He had a tough time last season, not only in F3 but in the Performance League as well, what he also races in. So we know Spud can race well and win races, and for me it's good to see Spud fighting back at the front again. He is a good racer. He's just had some bad luck in previous races, and to see him up there with Craig as well, who Craig has also had some bad luck, but Craig is a good racer and can get those race wins and podiums when it all works out for him. So yeah, F3 I think is going to be very interesting to watch this year with the likes of Spud, Craig, Mr. P and a few others in there as well. You just could find having multiple race winners over the season in that league.
Yeah, absolutely, and that is Spud's 5th all-time win in F3, which actually moves him joint second alongside Betrayer in the win column. So yeah, Spud up to 5 wins as part of F3, and yeah, it was actually his birthday the day before as well. So happy birthday to Spud this week. That's a great way to celebrate it, and equally, I'm sure he'll enjoy turning. I'm sure he'll appreciate me saying I don't know 74 years old or so, something like that. He's been here forever, but yeah. So congratulations to him. And just quickly going back over the races, I've got a couple of star performers down here for each race, and I just want to highlight a driver that maybe didn't finish on the podium. Some of them did, some of them didn't. Like I said, I've got Harry going 16th to 3rd in F1. Ton Albanak did go 10th to 3rd in Realistic Performance on Tuesday. And Gaming Alamonda joins us. Fantastic commentator. In fact, a commentator that I've watched for quite a while, trying to get tips on when I started our commentary. And he went 18th to 6th in his debut in F2 last night as well. So fantastic result for him there. And I've got star performer in F3. It is the guy that finished in second position. It's F1 Mr. P80, and Simon going 16th to 2nd. So some really good results from some of the guys here. And we head off to Germany for round 2 next week. And what are you expecting? Completely different circuit to what we saw in Hungary this week.
I am expecting more overtakes. I don't know about you, but for me, especially on Tuesday night at Racing against Jos, even though I got the DRS, it was still really difficult to get the move done down into turn 1. If you wasn't close enough, it was too risky to try a dive there. But in Germany, as I found, particularly last season, there is a lot more opportunities to overtake. So I'd imagine a lot more chances of swapping positions throughout that race. And you never know with Germany what weather it always brings. We've seen yesterday in F2 with the weather turning towards the end. Germany can be the same as well. We could have really mixed conditions. So even though it's completely different, I think we'll just have just as exciting racing in Germany as what we did this week in Hungary, probably with a few more overtakes.
Yeah, hopefully, and of course you can watch that all boy joining us on the YouTube channel from next Monday, of course, with Sab and I in the commentary box for IRL F1. And yeah, that brings us to the end of today's proceedings, and of course, as always, we will finish off with the hot lap question. There's only a few more of these before the end of the season and before we go on our season break. So yeah, you've only got a few more to make, and this one's an easy one. I realised I've been pushing you too hard over the last few weeks, so I'm gonna give you an easy one this evening. And we were discussing McLaren and Carlos Sainz, and obviously it's the first podium that they've had for a while. Of course, it was the first time since, as you said quite correctly earlier, the 2014 Australian Grand Prix, where Kevin Magnussen did finish second, and Jenson Button was equally promoted up to third. Now, can you remember who won the race?
Wow. I don't know. Wow. I genuinely don't know. Without trying to quickly Google it, I cannot remember. I can't remember. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I cannot answer that. That's bad, I know. I don't know.
It's 2014, so think about who may have been pretty decent that sort of time.
Well, you've got like
They
Seb
finished
Vettel.
30 seconds ahead of Kevin Magnussen, or 26 seconds ahead of Kevin Magnussen, 30 ahead of Jensen.
I don't know. I genuinely don't know.
I
My
thought
mind's gone blank.
I thought this was an easy one. I thought you'd have that image of Jensen and Kevin standing on the podium burned into your memory. It was Nico Rosberg was the winner of that race.
If I remember rightly, Jensen wasn't still on the podium.
Was he not?
No, because Daniel Ricciardo wasn't disqualified until after the podium celebrations.
Well,
so Jensen didn't actually get to stand on the podium that race.
I stand corrected then. Well, yeah. So it was Nico Rosberg that
there you go.
was the race.
That's why I couldn't remember, because I'm not going to go down that subject. But
my other one this evening was going to be, can you remember the last time that McLaren won the Constructors' Championship?
It had been with Mika Hakkinen.
It would have been
in 98.
Yes, it was. So that was why I didn't go for that. Was far too easy. So yeah, I thought I'd go for a slightly harder one. So but yeah, good to see that I stumped you once again. So yeah, we continued the streak. But yeah, that is us done, guys. And thanks for joining us for episode 21 of the IRL podcast. And of course, as always, you can follow us on Twitter at Invictus RL on Twitter and Instagram. You can go to invictusracingleague.com for the website. Equally, if you'd like to become a premium member where you can support us as a league, you can support the podcast to grow and to get better features, to make everything a little bit sharper for you can go to the premium member site on the website, the Invictus, and check that out. And equally, if you want to check out some of the records that we've got here in Invictus, go to the fantastic Hall of Fame section, which I always scan over every now and then to see where I'm standing in some of the all-time standings. Of course, you can go to Invictus Racing League on Facebook if you want to check out the Facebook, where we get some brilliant captures of the race highlights, whether it be the videos or equally some photo albums. And of course, if you'd like to get on the grid here at Invictus Racing League, you can go to the Apply to Race section. If you'd like to follow Sab or I on social media, it's at GT2_driving for myself, at Alan Sabatino for Sab. And yeah, Sab, as we finish up episode 21, we're looking forward to a few more episodes before we go on a well-deserved break. Yes,
it's crazy, isn't it? How quick this podcast has flown through this season. It's been an absolute pleasure to be part of. I cannot wait to finish these off now, going up to Abu Dhabi, and then starting afresh with new podcasts, and even chucking in some specials over Christmas. So plenty to look forward to with this podcast, plenty to chat about as always. I've thoroughly enjoyed being part of this. So let's finish these last few off with a bang, and hopefully get you that tattoo.
Let's hope so. But yeah, thanks for sticking with us, guys. Hope you're enjoying it. Let us know if you are and where you're listening from. And of course, we will see you next Monday for the IRL F1 race around Germany. If not, we'll see you back here Thursday nights. The podcast gets uploaded to SoundCloud, Spotify and iTunes, or of course you can watch it on YouTube. And of course you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're almost at 200 subscribers, so it would be mega to hit that before Christmas. So have a great week, guys. We will see you next week for the second round of the Invictus Racing League and for the 22nd episode of the podcast. Have a great one, guys. Good night.